This morning I posted an article on the Classical Liberal Arts Academy website titled, "Let's Radically Improve Catholic Homeschooling." And I explained that the word radically is derived from the Latin word radix, which means a root. Let's get to the root of the issues and radically improve Catholic homeschooling. There's a few things that I mean by that, and it's hard to express these things in an article because it takes so much time, and I really don't know how many people are going to read through an entire article. So I'd like to just comment a little bit about how we can radically improve Catholic homeschooling, and I'd like to share a little bit about how I intend to help with this in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. The most important thing, by far, is that homeschooling families, homeschooling parents, need to learn what it actually means to be a homeschooling parent. Most homeschooling parents really don't understand what homeschooling is. When a parent registers with a state as a home school, that home school, is as legitimate a school as any public or private school around them. A home school is a real school. And I can't emphasize this enough because I don't think that parents realize what homeschooling is. I think what most parents think is when they choose to homeschool that they're telling the state, we'll take care and we'll arrange for our own children's education. We'll take care of it. And so they register as homeschoolers, but they don't realize what they've just done. When a family registers as a homeschool, they actually create a new school in that state. The parents are the administrators of that school. So if you think back to when you were in school, if you went to a public school or a private school, think back to the principal of that school. You, the homeschool parent, are the principal, are the administrator of your home school. You're a real, legal school administrator. You have full control over curriculum decisions. You have full control over the resources that the students in your school study. You have full control over the methods of instruction and assessment. You are the principal, the administrator of your home school. And I really don't think homeschool parents realize that. I know this because I'm contacted with questions from homeschool parents that make no sense. They make no sense because the homeschool parent is looking around for someone who they imagine needs to serve a role in their children's education, and they don't realize that that person is the homeschool parent. For example, I'll have a parent contact me and ask me if we're going to provide a transcript for their child's studies. And I say, no, we're not going to provide a transcript. You're the homeschool parent. You're the school administrator. You provide the transcript. You decide what courses the child receives credit for. You decide how many credits the child receives. You decide what the child's grades are. You make the transcript. The name of your homeschool goes on the top of that transcript. On the line where it seeks the signature of a school administrator, your signature goes on that line. You are a school administrator. You don't need anyone to make that transcript for you. You don't need anyone else to sign that transcript to make it official. When you registered your homeschool, you became an official school administrator, and your homeschool is as real a school as any other. And you need to realize that. I'm a homeschooling father, so I own the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. But in our state, North Carolina, our family is registered as a homeschool, and the name of our homeschool is simply William C. Michael Academy. That's just the name we gave to the state as the name for our homeschool. When my eldest 3 children were ready to move on and leave home and pursue their military careers and college studies, I simply typed up a transcript, an example of which you can see on the Academy website. The top of the transcript, it doesn't say Classical Liberal Arts Academy, it says William C. Michael Academy. On the bottom of that transcript, the administrator is William C. Michael. Why? Because I'm the father. It's my homeschool. The transcript says nothing about who I am, says nothing about my education, says nothing about the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, because all of that's irrelevant. I'm the administrator of a homeschool. My homeschool is registered with the state, just like any private school would be registered with the state. Now, I've owned a private school, so I know exactly what it's like to be a private school owner and administrator. It's the same exact thing. My homeschool is no less official than my private school was. And I don't think homeschool parents realize that. And what's worse is I think that homeschool publishers actually take advantage of this ignorance and lack of realization in homeschool parents, and they sort of feed this idea that they need some outside approval for their homeschooling, when they don't. You don't need any outside approval for the education of your children. You don't. And you shouldn't let anyone tell you that you do, because they're false, they're wrong. You don't. You are the authority in your child's education. If there's a school and your children enroll in that school, the only reason that school has any authority over your child is because you've given it to them through enrollment. The school itself has no authority. The authority belongs to the parents. The parents choose a school. This is their right. The church teaches that the right to choose a school is a fundamental right. The only reason any school has anything to say about a child's education is because a parent voluntarily gives that authority to the school through enrollment. If you don't enroll in a school is meaningless for your children. You do not need to send your children to a school. If you homeschool, your children are in a school, in a real school that's just as real as any private school. And you are the school administrator with just as much authority as any other school administrator. You don't need teaching degrees. You don't need education degrees. That doesn't make you a school administrator. Getting hired as a school administrator is what makes you a school administrator. And when you start a homeschool, you basically hire yourself as a school administrator. When my children applied for admission to the military, to colleges, and so on, there was never a question There was never a question about their homeschooling. Never. They took their standardized tests. They scored very well on their tests. And that was it. The standardized test was all the proof that anyone needed, that they received a quality education. Colleges looked at their transcript just to make sure that the courses that they desire to see on a high school transcript were completed, and they were. And that was it. There wasn't a question asked about the homeschool or what the parents' qualifications are or what textbooks did you use or what methods did you use to teach the children. Nothing. My children went into the military. They were told that based on their test scores, they could choose any military career that they wanted. No one said a word about homeschooling. Never. They enrolled in colleges. No one said a word about homeschooling. Never a word. And so all of this talk about transcripts from homeschool programs or accreditation for homeschool, it's all baloney. There's no need for any of that stuff. And you need to realize that as a parent, you have real authority in homeschooling. You don't need to be accredited. Accredited by whom? You're the parent. The accreditation is sought by a school to impress the parents, because the parents choose the schools. The parents pay the tuition. The parents are everything in a school. Schools seek accreditation only to impress parents. The parents decide which school is best. The parents pay the school tuition. The parents often pay the college tuition. Everyone knows who works in education that the parents are always in control. And so you need to not allow yourself to be duped out of your parental authority, the real authority you possess, first as a parent, and second as a homeschool administrator, as a school administrator. So the first major improvement that I think is necessary for homeschooling is for parents to really dig their heels in and play the role that they possess, which is they are the administrator of their home school. There's no need for an outside school program. There's no need to enroll your child in a K-12 program that's going to give you transcripts or report cards or grades, or you don't need any of those things. You don't need any such thing. A college is going to ask for a transcript. They're never going to ask for a report card. They're never going to ask about the textbooks that were used for any of the courses. They're never going to ask about the students' test grades or assignment grades, even attendance. They're not going to ask those questions because it's none of their business, first of all. And they're not interested in seeking that information. And secondly, they have means of their own for assessing student achievement. For the military, it's the ASVAB test. For colleges, it's the SAT or ACT. So there are ways for them to check quality of studies. They're not going to dig into these details of students' homeschool activity, just like they don't dig into the history of any student's high school activity or private school activity. There's no such thing, and you have no need for that. The second improvement I want to suggest, which is related to this, is that we stop all of the craziness with assessment and scores and data and records and paperwork. None of it's necessary. None of it. None of it's necessary. Colleges don't ask to see it. Employers don't ask to see it. The state doesn't ask to see it. You as parents don't need it. And we need to stop, because so much of what's done is done only for the sake of data. And I can give you an example. When I was a private school teacher, our superiors, whether it was a headmaster, a principal, vice principal, they would ask to see grade books once in a while to see what we were doing. And as a teacher, I was concerned with whether or not my students were learning. And I judged my students' progress based on our discussions, based on whether they were actually speaking more intelligently, showing that they were learning the lessons they were studying, and that they were living well. Those are the real assessments of education. But we would have to make up artificial school assessments for the sake of grade books, numbers, report cards, and so on. And that was the only reason we made them. The tests and assignments were actually created for the sake of having something to put in the grade book. But at home, there's no need for any such thing. There's no need for all of these artificial nonsense assignments and scores and tests and so on. For example, when we study classical ethics, Aristotle says that the goal of the study of ethics is to become a good man. That's the goal. And the child's behavior, whether he's acting virtuously or not, is the real assessment of the study of ethics. That's the real assessment. How is the child behaving? How is the child speaking? Is he respectful to his elders and superiors? Is he kind to inferiors? Is he temperate in the way he eats, the way he drinks, the way he sleeps, the way he dresses, the way he behaves? Is he temperate? Is he just? Does he have fortitude? And so on. His actual virtue, his actual life and behavior is the assessment for his studies in ethics. If he's studying classical languages, the assessment is whether or not he can read the language. If he can't, who cares what his test scores are? If he studies Latin for 3 years and can't read the New Testament in Latin, or doesn't understand prayers in Latin, or can't translate a Catholic hymn in Latin, who cares what his quiz scores are? He's failed. He failed to achieve the goal of the studies. If he studies English grammar and English composition, but then talks like someone who just walked in off the street, it doesn't matter what his essay grades were. He chooses not to speak with proper grammar. If he studies mathematics, whether he can solve real-life problems or whether he can score well on the SAT, which is the purpose of most modern mathematics studies, if he can't do those things, no one cares whether he did his homework every night, what his test scores were in algebra class. No one cares. It's irrelevant. His life and his work and his activity is the real assessment. And as a homeschool parent, you're able to assess that in a way that no school teacher could ever assess it. And that's one of the reasons why I thought teaching in a school was a waste of time. We'd get a few hours with kids and we're supposed to teach and assess their progress, but they're rarely with us. Whereas a parent in a homeschool, you live with that child. You know everything about him. And that's the true assessment. And you as a parent shouldn't settle for any artificial assessment. If you're paying for a school program or for teachers and tutors, you should demand results. You should demand measurable results. Not listen to any artificial baloney about how well he's doing in class or how promising his studies are. Baloney. His life is the true assessment. We don't need data. We don't need artificial report cards and test scores. We need to see the fruits of good teaching by how the children behave. And the only person in a position to produce that real learning and assess that real learning is mom and dad. And that's why homeschooling, if done right, has the potential to be the best source of Catholic education. So the first improvement I'd recommend, radical improvement, is for parents to really understand what they are as homeschool parents, to really understand what they are. And secondly, for parents to refuse to accept artificial goals and objectives for learning, artificial assessments, scores and grades and so on. Your child's behavior, the way your child speaks, the way your child thinks, the way your child acts, that's the true fruit and test of his education. So those are two important ways that if homeschool parents would focus on those things and just get rid of all of the junk, get rid of all of the artificial school nonsense that wouldn't exist if there wasn't money to be made off it by teachers and publishers, get rid of all the junk, stop paying attention to all the nonsense, and focus on your child's actual thinking and speaking and acting, because that's the true and only assessment of your child's learning, whether your child is actually becoming a virtuous person and preparing for independent adult life. The third thing I'd like to say is that when we talk about goals in homeschooling, they have to be real. We can't set goals that are not in our control. We can't set goals that we, the agents or the doers, the workers, don't have the power to fulfill. Those are not reasonable goals. It's common to hear homeschool parents talk about their goal is to raise saints. And that's simply foolish because that's not in our control. If you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraphs 2221 through 2231 list for us the duties of parents toward their children. The fulfillment of those duties should direct the goals of your homeschool. You don't have the power to make your children saints. I mentioned this in the article. When St. Thomas Aquinas was asked, what does one need to do to become a saint? He said, you must will it. You must will it. If you desire to become a saint, you must will it. Parents cannot make their children saints. Your job is to provide your children with an excellent Catholic education. That's your duty. And that duty is objective. It provides you with specific things to do, specific tasks, and you can check those boxes at the end of the day, at the end of the year. When your child enters into adulthood, you can say, those boxes are checked. I have fulfilled my duty as a parent. If you go into parenting and education saying things like, I'm going to raise a saint, how do you do that? It's not even possible. It's ignorant to even say something like that. Because you cannot make a child will to do God's will or will to be holy. You can't control that. If parents could control that, then any time there was a child who wasn't a saint, that parent would be guilty of failing to raise a saint. And that's obviously ridiculous. There are many excellent parents whose children don't follow their instruction. The whole book of Proverbs is about a foolish child who doesn't listen to instruction. We have in the example of the 12 apostles, Judas, who is personally taught by Christ himself, saw Christ's miracles, and chose to ally himself with the Jews and betray Christ. We see King David, who raised Solomon, the wisest of all men, and Solomon tells us, "My father told me, get wisdom." His father instructed him, and yet David was also the father of Absalom, who's one of the worst characters in the Old Testament. Isaac, the son of Abraham, was a father of twin sons, Jacob and Esau. Scripture tells us that God said, "Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated." Adam and Eve were the parents of Cain and Abel. Abel was righteous, Cain was a murderer. So this idea that parents raise saints is false. And if you go into parenting or homeschooling with a silly goal like that, first of all, you're not going to achieve it. And second of all, you're going to frustrate yourself and cause yourself to make many terrible decisions because of a false goal. In that article, I explain what I would recommend our goals be in parenting and homeschooling. And they're objective, attainable, measurable goals that you can actually achieve. And so we have to make sure that our goals are realistic. It's cute to say nice things, like we're going to raise saints. It's cute, but it's not responsible. It's not true. It's not reasonable, and it's not going to be accomplished. What we do need to do, we need to raise children with good habits. That's in our control. You know, if your children wake up to a house where the television's on, garbage TV shows are on in the morning, they wake up and lay on the couch watching television, eat junk food out of the cabinet, mom gets up 3 hours later, dad is gone or still in bed himself, the kids are loose in the house, they don't wash, they don't dress, they don't pray, they don't get to studies, there's no order in the home. Those children are going to have terrible habits, and that's a failure of parenting. Parents produce habits in children's lives. Parents have authority. God says, children, obey your parents. Parents set the schedule in the home. Parents decide what's available to the children in the home. Parents decide how the children dress, what the children eat, how the house is decorated and organized, where the family lives. Parents decide on the culture of the home, and children are raised by parents to have good or bad habits. That's something that you should be concerned about. Making sure your children have good habits. Making sure your children are healthy. Not that you can avoid disease, but any disease that's caused by bad nutrition, lack of exercise, unhealthy living conditions, and so on, those conditions are avoided by good parenting. Parents are responsible to lead their children to good health as far as is possible. I can tell you that in my children's life, one of the greatest advantages that they had for all of the academic work, for all of their religious education, on and on, all advantages and benefits they've enjoyed, the benefit that has given them the most opportunities in life as adults has been their physical health. Kids growing up today are simply not healthy. And so things like that, good habits, health, a good diet, a good schedule, the leisure activities of a family, whether on Friday night your family flips on sports full of garbage commercials and other stuff, or whether you watch a historical movie, a classic movie together that's worth watching, those kind of cultural choices of parents make a huge difference in the lives and education and culture of the children themselves. The kind of music you listen to, the activities you support, the activities you have the children participate in, and so on. Are those activities just idle time wasters, just to keep the kids busy? Or are they skills that they're developing through recreational activities, extracurricular activities that are going to enrich their adult lives? That's a big difference. So, the first thing I said was for homeschool parents to understand what homeschooling really is and to actually run homeschools for their children. The second thing is to eliminate all of the unnecessary activities and assessments that just fill modern schools with useless data that's meaningless, but to look to the children's lives as the true assessment. And third, to set goals that are attainable, that are right, that are measurable, for which you're accountable. That's a third important change. We have to avoid the silly talk, especially in Catholic circles, and realize we have real tasks, real duties to fulfill, real checklists to take care of, and we can't just talk nonsense about things that are not in our control. So, if we get to the root of these issues, we can rethink Catholic homeschooling and ask, how can we accomplish these goals? It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. It doesn't matter what the public schools are doing. It doesn't matter what private schools are doing. None of that matters. What matters is, what are our goals and how can we achieve those goals? The changes that you're going to see this year as we continue to develop the Classical Liberal Arts Academy are going to help homeschool parents be homeschool parents. Not treat them like the Classical Liberal Arts Academy is a school that they're enrolled in, because that's false. The Classical Liberal Arts Academy is going to provide homeschool parents with resources that they need to help their children get the education that they need as Catholic children. It's going to be free. The whole curriculum is going to be freely accessible for homeschool parents. Parents, if you're willing to work hard, you can give your children a full classical Catholic education for free using our resources. If you want help with instruction, specialized instruction, I'm publishing videos where I'm going to walk through every lesson in the curriculum, just as a resource that a mom can let a child watch. You want to learn Latin, you want to learn Greek, you want to learn classical philosophy, you want to study this or that. Here's a video from a full-time teacher, a classicist, who provides instruction. Those videos have time durations on them. That counts as time with an instructor. 120 hours in a subject counts as 1 high school credit. It's just that simple. It's that simple. If your child is working on an assignment, working on studying a lesson, taking notes, writing out translation exercises, filling assessment worksheets, and they're under your supervision as their teacher, that time spent is time with an instructor. That goes towards 120 hours per year for a high school credit. These kinds of things I really want to help homeschool parents understand, because what I see homeschool parents doing just makes no sense. And the results, generally speaking, are very, very poor, to say the least. Seton Home Study, for example, boasts on their website that the SAT scores of their students are slightly higher than the average in America. Can you even imagine parents spending thousands and thousands of dollars on a curriculum that is entirely dedicated to serving a K-12 education, spending years working with the children, and the result is an average SAT score? That's the kind of thing that homeschool parents just cannot allow. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I was a public school student. My parents were completely uninvolved in my education. And I was a national merit semifinalist, scoring very high on the SAT with no parental help at all, in a free public school with no supervision. To say that we're going to homeschool our children, go through all of this sacrifice, all of this work, have mom at home working constantly with the children, the family often living on a single income for the sake of the children's education. We're going to choose a curriculum that claims to be accredited and serves a K-12 curriculum, and then in the end, we're going to get an average SAT score, the same scores the kids in the public schools are getting. Homeschool parents can't accept these standards. We have to aim higher. We have to radically improve homeschooling, and we can. We can improve it. I've seen it in my own children, in the success that they've had moving on after finishing their studies. I've seen just how little is required in terms of documentation and artificial academic work that parents are constantly concerned about, and I'm constantly telling them to not pay attention to that stuff. Just focus on the actual Christian education and development of your children. Homeschooling can be radically improved, and I hope that we can do it this year as we move to make things more affordable, more instructive in terms of actual video content. And I'd really like to help Catholic homeschool parents make the most of the one shot that they get in their children's education. Because the results, generally speaking, of homeschooling are not good. We can boast that we're a little bit better than the worst schools, but that's not a real standard. We're spending a lot of time, a lot of money, making great sacrifices. There should be results for the work that we're doing. And if there aren't, something's wrong and it needs to be fixed. And we need to set the bar higher and get the results that we need. I hope that's helpful. If you'd like to discuss this, get in touch with me. I'd like to talk more about it, share more details. You can email me anytime at wcm@classicalliberarts.com or contact me through the website. I hope that's helpful. Don't get discouraged and don't quit. God bless.